This is Recruiters on the Rise, and I'm Colleen Gallagher. Join me for candid conversations with talent leaders as we explore the work that drives them, the lessons they've learned, and how they're helping people find careers they love. The show is sponsored by Lavalier, an interview intelligence platform built by Textio. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Recruiters on the Rise. I'm so excited for our guest today. We also get to celebrate some news about her role that we'll get into a little bit later. She has a degree in opera and has been through 3 startup acquisitions as the people and talent leader. And somewhere in the middle of all that, she co-founded a company that also got acquired. She started in contingency recruiting, has built people teams, and has some really exciting metrics in terms of how she's improved time to hire and offer acceptance rate that we'll get into as well. She was just promoted to SVP of People and Talent at Roofr. Jen Paxton, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Well, I'd love to start off with just asking folks like yourself, what's the one thing or one action that sets the best recruiters apart from the rest?
Honestly, one of the things I love about recruiting in general, and I think the best recruiters, has been the curiosity behind recruiting. Recruiting's so special because you really get to be like this matchmaker. One of the people I idolize was like, it's like dating. You have like two sides of this, and you get to put those two sides together. And when it goes together perfectly, the high you get, the rush you get from that success, like there's nothing like it. I haven't personally found anything like it. So I think that like curiosity, that level of like persuasions, like negotiations, storytelling, like all of those things kind of play a factor in it.
I guess in terms of the curiosity piece, how does that tie into the urgency you think recruiters need to have? I know you've talked with me before about how like urgency and hustle is also something that you find really important to have as a recruiter.
Yeah. I mean, I cut my teeth on the contingency side where you had to make sure you were moving very quickly and, really coaching that manager to move quickly because, all like speed kills all deals, right? And not to go into kind of too much of the salesy side of it, but it's really true because I, again, like that kind of endorphin rush that a candidate is getting, having that phone call with that hiring manager or that final round interview, you wanna feed on that high. You wanna keep that momentum going. And if you slow down or if that hiring manager kind of has this hiccup moment, that is only going to potentially lead to uncertainty or maybe like hesitation on the candidate side. So you want to continue to have that momentum going. And a lot of times, hiring managers don't always have the full perspective. So it's really kind of the recruiter's job to give that manager that perspective and kind of that hustle, that urgency so that they don't rest, they don't like wait for it. Cause even in this market where it's still maybe an employer's market in a lot of cases, candidates are still picky, like they're still like trying to make the best choice for themselves. And again, like if you give them time to hesitate, they might. So you don't want to do that.
I like the way you framed it, and actually, I don't think anyone's talked about it in this way, but um, keeping the momentum going and sort of like not getting that sort of lull that happens when you lose the momentum. And one of the things I mentioned in your intro was about how you have improved some of the metrics around time to hire and I think from like 45 days to 30 days, and you have a 90% plus for acceptance rate. How does that tie into this? Like, what are some of the practical takeaways for people in terms of how you've been able to drive those improvements?
Don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes I hate to preface it by that, but it's real, right? Sometimes recruiting can be seen as like a babysitter almost. You're like babysitting the hiring manager. And as I mentioned, kind of that urgency side of it, there's this education as well, where a hiring manager also might be on the fence with a candidate. And my education, kind of my guidance is usually if you're on the fence, you're probably going to be a no. We should move on. Because there's a lot of like decision paralysis where like you might like him and Han, like, I don't know what happens if this happens. And so you really want to get them over that hurdle. And sometimes, a hiring manager can be like, well, what happens if like I miss them? And I'm like, you'll get the next one, right? It's a challenge, but it's something that I think we need to do more of because slow down your time to hire as well by a hiring manager. Just like trying to keep a candidate warm for too long, right? It's a delicate balance, honestly, because you've seen the pendulum swing the other way, where it's like the hiring manager like is never fulfilled. I kind of recall back to like one of my earlier startup days when I was an IC recruiter and this hiring manager, I came into this role and the first thing I was introduced to was this hiring manager. And like the thing I was told about them was, yeah, they're just never going to be happy. They've been looking for this, like the sales leader in particular for like months and months. And I was like, well, why, like, what's causing this hesitation? Like, why has this role been open for this long? And I was like, yeah, a hiring manager might be like challenging to work with, but we got in there, we sat down, I had a lot of conversations with them on what are they exactly looking for and found out where they were actually able to flex. And one of my like claims to fame, my like the first like 60 days was getting them higher in the door where they'd been looking for like months for this person. It's like 3 or 4 months and I filled it within a month. And it was really understanding kind of what they're actually looking for and helping them to understand what they were looking for. Because sometimes don't really know.
Yeah, I think you've talked about this before when we talked previously. You talked about it as going slow to go fast with hiring managers. Can you say more about what that looks like in practice?
Yeah. So at Roofr in particular, we do a hiring kind of kickoff. I think a lot of companies, this is like standard practice, right? That you should be doing this kind of kickoff to understand kind of the must haves, the nice to haves kind of thing. But sometimes hiring managers are like, well, why do I want to invest that time in the very beginning? Like, I'll know it when I see it. And so many times, like the know it when I see it drags on forever, right? Because they might have seen a person and like they almost fit, but they can't name why it's not a fit. They'll be like, I just need somebody who's stronger. And you're like, well, what do you mean when you say stronger? Right. And so a lot of those things can actually be resolved in that kickoff conversation. One of my earliest startups, I actually made hire managers do homework where I made them go on LinkedIn and find 3 profiles themselves. Number one, to feel like the pain of sourcing, but really to hone in on like, why do you like this profile over this other profile? Like, tell me why. And it gets them, again, it just gets them thinking in the right direction of what am I actually looking for? What is the actual talent gap I'm trying to fill?
Yeah, I know it when I see it is code for I have no idea what I want.
I think that's the toughest thing about hiring is it's not an exact science. There's such an art to it. It is so very nuanced and you have so many opportunities to fail or like think that you failed too that, hire managers fall into a lot of pitfalls because of that.
I love the example or the exercise of go find 3 profiles of people. What would you say to people who say, I could never get a hiring manager to spend the time doing that?
There's a lot of storytelling and like the why behind it. And it doesn't always work either. Like you have to have a hiring manager who really understands why they're doing the exercise, which there is some like education on why you can tell them to do this. I have also for those hesitant hiring managers, we're going to do a meeting anyway, right? We're going to have a conversation about what you're looking for. That's when we both jump on LinkedIn together. I share my screen. I type in kind of the job title that they might want. And we might go through some profiles that way. Because sometimes the hardest thing to do is to have that hiring manager carve out the time. And so that kind of comes back to that babysitting mentality of, I'm just going to sit down with you. Like, I'm going to take your time, but it's going to be a very impactful and valuable time. And again, it is going to save you the time in the long run of having to go through trial and error, where we get you the person that you really need so much quicker.
Yeah, and I think, as a hiring manager, what I've experienced in the past where I think some of that goes wrong, and when I think about like what sets a good recruiter, the best recruiters apart from the rest, is coming to that meeting with some prep. Because I definitely come to some of those meetings where they're like, "So you want to hire this person? Like, what does that even mean?" And I'm like, I don't want to have to explain to you what a senior financial analyst is, for example. Like, I think it's so important to come to some of those meetings and have some point of view. And if you can't get the hiring manager to find three profiles, maybe you find the three profiles and say, you know, is this along the right lines, or give me some feedback, right? Because I think, you know, I often have heard, mm, a lot of times, and we have a feature on our platform that looks and helps with making sure your intake call was strong as it can be. And I've had a lot of people push back and say it's a strategy setting call. And I actually think that's so true, right? You have to be able to align with the hiring manager during that call on like what is the hiring strategy.
But also to your point, about really knowing the role, and you really nailed it. You're like, I don't want to have to explain to you what, like why I need a financial analyst. There is also having a recruiter know kind of the function that they're recruiting for. I think why there's sometimes like, especially like bigger companies where they'll do like an HRBP or like a recruiter kind of all in one. It's because it's already entrenched in that team as well. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time too. You really understand how that whole team is made up and how person would really fill the gap. There's something special about that too.
Do you think, you talking about how you got your early start in recruiting, you were in a contingency role. How do you think that has helped you? And I'm asking kind of a leading question because I do feel like some of the best recruiters I know also have started out either with an agency, whether it was contingent or retained. But there's something you learn, I think, in that, and that's my opinion. I'm curious to get yours as somebody who's done that.
I'm probably very biased because like I have seen the success of my story, and I've actually hired a good amount of people that have come out of the agency side of this as well. Um, the contingency side is really hard. And I think again, because I'm a bit biased on this end, there's so many you don't get as many chances with a hiring manager either. You have to prove your worth almost immediately. A lot of the times that I was working on these roles, there were new companies that I had never gone into before, new hiring managers that I was just establishing a relationship with. And so I had to build value very quickly. And that actually took a lot of front end research, knowing kind of what the company does in advance, knowing, the hiring manager, who are they connected to? What have they hired for before? How big is potentially is their team? So really knowing kind of the ins and outs of it, again, helps you build that trust very, very quickly. And then again, going back to that whole speed side of this, I have to prove my value immediately. If I don't, so the very first kind of staffing firm I was in, it was like the Wild West. And so no one person owned a company. And so double-edged sword, like this is actually why I left that company, but like also, it
You learned a lot.
learned a lot. But it was one of those things where like if I couldn't find that person, like a person on my team could go to that hiring manager and give them another person. So it led me to be very competitive on that end because I didn't want to lose. Like I just couldn't. There's not one in my body that says like I'm okay losing at this point. Like I just couldn't. That was not an option, right? Which I think just kind of led me to all of the things that have happened in my career afterwards, right? Like just not losing is not an option. But I think that like it just instilled in me this like urgency, this like competitive nature, this like let's get the speed to value as quickly as possible because if not, I'm gonna lose out. And of course it was livelihood. So like if I didn't make the money, then, wasn't able to pay my rent.
I know there are some people that tend to push back on the idea that recruiting is like sales, and it sounds like where you land on that is that it's similar.
In a lot of ways, it is very similar to sales. There is like that relationship management side of it. But again, in any kind of market, when you want a candidate to accept an offer, when you want that hiring manager hopefully to have that candidate, there is that level of like persuasion and negotiation on that end. It's not it's not like a note taker admin kind of thing. Like maybe that's in like a high volume where like I don't know, like the stakes aren't as high potentially, but a lot of the companies I've worked for, they're hiring, a handful of people here and there, and anyone that is a mishire is like detrimental to the company. Like it kneecaps our success. So you have to kind of get it right.
I guess pulling on that thread a little when you talk about how important it is to hire and making sure that you're hiring the right people. I'm curious how you think about this now in your even more elevated role and as a people leader. What are some of the things that you talk about with the leadership team in terms of like a talent scorecard? What metrics do you talk about? What resonates with the rest of the executives and the board?
So sometimes it is based on kind of risk and finding somebody who has done that job before. Uh, and that could be very, very specific, where it's the like specific programming language that they have had before. But I also would say it almost comes down to the environment that they were in previously as well. It is a recognized bias of my own, but I also have kind of the data to back it up at this point, where I have been in startups and I have seen hiring managers take a chance on someone who has been in like a bigger company, like more corporate, more process, and it has gone poorly almost every time. And so that's another thing that we talk about is like what is kind of the candidate, like the ideal candidate profile for us. And it's not just the hard skills and the soft skills, if you will, but it's also like what is their lived experience? Like what is the environment that they have thrived in before? And what have they not liked being in too? Because again, like if you're not used to chaos, but you say into ambiguity, it almost never works. And I'm the kind of product of this of like, I love chaos. Like bring me a messy problem, bring me something that doesn't have a clear answer. And like, I'm going to feed off of it. But if you put me in like a bank, I'm probably going to die of boredom. Like it will, again, like and no offense to banks, love banks. They're great. But like, it's just not my environment. Like not every culture is for a person. Not every company is, for, again, that matchmaking side of it too. So yeah, ideal candidate profile is really important. And so we work together on the hiring manager on that scorecard of what are the hard skills, maybe some of the soft skills as well. But at the leadership level, we're thinking about, what is our kind of ideal candidate profile? What are the kind of competencies that we want to have as a whole company? And how is that going to impact our business?
I know one metric that tends to get floated around a lot of this concept of quality of hire. And my biased opinion is that there's like not one single number that you can look at. And so I'm curious, like, how do you evaluate for that? What are some of the metrics you look at in terms of just overall effectiveness of your talent acquisition organization?
We are looking at a few different factors, and you're right. There's not kind of one silver bullet. There has to be a few things kind of compiled on top of each other. So I think the first kind of natural one is looking at the kind of new hires ramp up time and like how quickly have they actually gotten up to actually doing the job. That's really important. And then also we're looking at their turnover too. So if they have a turnover within that first year, that speaks to the quality of hire. And that's actually where the people team, the talent team have a great partnership, where the people team is usually on the receiving end of this termination that we're going to do. The talent team looking for it's almost like hungry for that education of where did we potentially go wrong. And so that's where you can leverage kind of those powers together. So that feeds into the quality of hire. And then the other thing I look at, which goes into more of the performance management side as well, is after so the companies I've been in, we usually do, a biannual performance review process where we will also plot out a 9 box too. And so I'm looking at kind of the employee's tenure and also their placement on the 9 box. I'm wanting all those new hires to be in, that top corner as well. If they're in that top corner, especially in that first round for them. So after that 3 months mark, after, we feel like they've ramped, that is a successful quality of hire for us.
One of the things you mentioned is ramp up time. And obviously, that's easier to understand at certain roles, like sales, for example. You can look at, quota attainment pretty easily. Is that 9 box and performance management process that you look at for other aspects? Is it some sort of manager survey? Like, how do you actually look and quantify it? Again, this is something that often ends up being sort of a little bit more qualitative than quantitative, but curious how you approach that.
There's also in the manager check-ins that we do. So we're actually moving away from, we were doing a 3-month check-in with the employee and the manager, and we're moving actually to a 30-day check-in with the employee, a 60-day check-in with the employee and the manager, and then a 90-day check-in as well with the employee and the manager. And at that 60-day mark, that's when we ask the manager, would you rehire this person? And it's a good bellwether of, did we do our job on the talent side? Like, is there something we could do to improve? And if they're saying no, that's when we're digging in more to, well, why would you not hire them again? The other thing that I'll do, and this is more on the HRBP side that we'll coach managers on, is if we are getting to that kind of termination very early on, so we'll say first 6 months that a person's been in the company, that's when we're actually coaching the manager on were there any even yellow flags that you saw in the interview process that might have alluded to this, right? Because sometimes the manager needs time to almost reflect and think about it too. And they may be able to recall something from the interview process. Maybe they didn't put it in their notes, but they were kind of hesitant, or maybe they felt pressure to hire quickly, because the business needed them to. So there's a lot of threads you can pull on there. And you really just start by asking a lot of questions.
What about, I feel like recruiters all have the experience of watching a hiring manager hire somebody that is not going to work out in the role. And I was talking with a friend of mine this morning who's a chief people officer, and she was telling me how one of the biggest pieces of advice she got from her mentor 15, 20 years ago was, in the HR function, you are there to support decision-making processes for the functional leaders, but it's not your decision to make. You just have to be a good partner to outline the risks and abilities around it. And so, how do you think about those situations where you're in a very specific example where somebody's hiring the wrong person? And especially in your role, sorry, this is a very long question, but obviously in your role where you span both talent acquisition and performance, talent management performance of the team. How do you get through a situation like that, and how do you move forward?
I love this question, but I would push back a little bit on the support side of this, because I would agree, yes, we're there to support and help, but we're also there to advise and give perspective. And if you are embedded in the business and know very much what that function is doing there, and also if it's in your gut, oh my gosh, this person is the wrong hire. I haven't been able to do this successfully very often, but it has happened a handful of times. So you can't always turn the ship around. And definitely there's a few I told you so moments that I have had over my career that I'm I was how am I tactfully going to say I told you so without coming off as this? Because some of the ones you're it's so obvious to me. I could spot this a mile away. Like, why would like what's in the manager's head, right? And so that's when you get into like, well, why do you think this person is the best person for this role? Can you tell me like how you see success happening here? How would they work collaborating with other people? Like you poke, right? And you really get them to understand where you're at. Some managers as well, you can be very direct with. It really just it depends on the manager. And you're like, I understand why you think that this person might be a good fit for this, and this reason. From my perspective and all of the experience I've had with them, not to mention, my 15 years of experience in recruiting and sussing out just people in general, these are the hesitations I have. And I want through each hesitation and see, number one, did you pick up on any of this in your conversations with them? Or do you see this being a hindrance to the team or the business? Because if you tie it back to that business perspective or like that business outcome, that might persuade them just enough. Some of the other ones, like that train has already left the station and you're just going to have to, I hate to say it, like clean up the mess when it's over too, which again, I've done plenty of in my career as well.
Yeah, and I think the way you framed it is definitely more accurate than what I said in terms of you are there to be a strategic advisor, and I like the advice you're giving around like, let's just break this down a little and ask some, you know, some probing question. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the hiring manager's decision to make, right? And yes, there's some instances where you just have to clean up the mess, and I feel that a little on the I started my career in finance. I feel the same way, right? There are certain things where it's like, I know we're not going to get the return that you're saying we're going to get on, this investment, and it's your budget. Ultimately, like, it's your decision to make, and there's only so much I can do to convince you, and I will be here to clean up the pile of poop later. And that's just a reality of every job, I think, in some ways.
I have gone so extreme sometimes that it is like bet my work-life boundaries. Like I have like not gone on vacation because I knew that this was like this crucial conversation was going to happen. A decision was going to be made. And I have the worst FOMO as well, like the worst. And so it has been like I'm just going to pause my life for a minute to like solve this problem. But it's also like, I don't want to have to clean it up later. If I can fix this now, then I don't want to. So it's a balance of like, can this be a real thing versus the cleanup side of it? Because I hate the cleanup.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And I think it's really about building the rapport with the hiring manager, right? Like you were saying, or like early on building that trust, building the rapport so they understand that it's not coming from a place other than to make them successful, right? Because I think that's where people start getting a little bit distrustful or can just stop listening, right? As if they think that you're coming at it with, bad intention. But although I rarely find that to be true, right? But I think it's less about whether that's true and more about if that's the perception. So
one thing that just popped in my head as you were mentioning this was like, you're also kind of like one part hostage negotiator too, where I like the word like in a good way, but I don't know how to say it in a good way. But like if you can frame it as like you're both coming at it at the same problem instead of you're coming at it from this way and they're coming at it from this way. If you can be like partners in it, it's so much easier to solve as well. Like all how you frame it, it's all in the communication side of this too.
totally. Yeah. We both have both aligned on the ultimate goal, right? We want to hire the best person into this role. That's the only reason that I'm pushing back here, because I have concern. Here they are, right? Just being very matter of fact, I think about it, and does help it to resonate a little bit more with the person you're dealing with. Shifting topics a little bit, I mentioned in the opening, you have a degree in opera. You talked about how you've been at a number of startups, co-founded a company. That's not the typical background, I should say, of an HR or people leader. So like, Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you've gotten to where you are right now.
I wasn't expecting to co-found a company as well. And I'm still like shocked and surprised by it. Like, yeah, like, I mean, it's over, but like, it's still like a thing, right? I think it starts off with when I started my career. I did not think I was going to go into HR. I did not think I was going to go into recruiting, like none of those things. Right. So I didn't know what to expect. And I just kind of kept, it just kind of kept my doors and my like options open. I was like, I don't know, maybe like I could do this. Like I'm pretty, I'd like to take risks, I guess. I guess I wouldn't have gotten to startups if I wasn't a little bit of a gambler on that end, right? Um, but it was one of those things where I think, and this is why I'm coming back to like, I don't even realize, like, I can't even remember, like, I did this, but I'm like, oh, I did this. Yeah. But sometimes, especially in like recruiting or HR, you might put yourself in like this little box too. And like, you think this is all you get. Right. And then you learn there's more out there and you kind of, yeah, you expand your scope or you kind of try this out over here a little bit and realize, oh, it's not that different, or like, it's kind of cool. You're not as intimidated by it as well. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing more, more people leaders in particular going into like COO role than like CPO roles recently. And that's an interesting trend to me, where I think when I first started out, I didn't think that was an option. Like, there's a part of me that's probably like, well, like we're fluffy, we're soft, like we're not like business people, right? And like that is a lot of the environment that I grew up in. And like we're in is like, we have this one function. We don't go into this. We don't go into this like, oh, HR is not in that business meeting. And you're like, well, why not? And I think that's where I have kind of push the boundaries a bit. And like, I love kind of where this evolution is going to, where, no, we're this strategic partner. Like, we should be in these meetings. I have a lot more, I would say, like sway and, negotiation power being in more of these conversations. And people are actually leveraging me that way too. It's been a win-win.
I mean, it's interesting in so many ways, right? Because again, there have been a lot of parallels between, and at least in my experience, resonates a lot with what you're saying around like, I sometimes in my career have felt like patted on the head, like, okay, thanks, finance person, like go back to the back room where you like crunch numbers on your little, keyboard and have your hat on. And I think the interesting thing about where we're at right now as well is so many companies, I think companies are starting to realize that like the humans are actually the most important asset of their company. And I know that seemed like a lot of people would be like, well, duh, haven't they always been? And it's like, I don't think actually a lot of leaders have always thought about it that way. And I do think we're also at a very important point for people leaders, talent leaders, because, when what was happening in the job market was happening a few years ago, where these companies were going out and hiring, especially, very large companies were hiring like tens of thousands of people. I think that it's very likely that you had a little bit of talent erosion in terms of the quality, because people were optimizing for speed and just naturally let quality fall to the wayside because that was just what was required. And I do feel like in talking to a lot of people leaders and talent acquisition leaders now, there's a much broader focus on, we have to hire quickly. People still want people hired quickly, but we also have to hire with high quality, because when you go from hiring, whether it's, 100 people a year and you're now hiring 20, or you're hiring 10,000 a year and you're now hiring, 3,000, like as a business leader, the thing I think about so much, and I can't remember exactly how you said it earlier in our conversation, but like, you hire the wrong person, it can really tank your business, right? It can have an outsized impact. And so I'm curious, just from a people leader, like, how have you seen that evolution play out over the last few years? Would you agree with what I was saying, like, or modify it in any way? Like, how are you seeing that, you just got promoted in your organization. So obviously like they value people in people leadership roles. Like how does somebody that runs a function that has in the past been seen as sort of this like back office support really come into the fold as a leader in the space?
I think, well, one thing I have done to really secure this is know the business. And this is like speaking with some of my peers and then also like speaking with some of the newer leadership that's been brought in. This isn't the norm apparently. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think that it wasn't a thing, because my mentality was, I just want to learn as much as I can. And I think I do a better job again, making more decisions and advising if I understand kind of how did this one function over here work with this function over here? Like, how does our overall business strategy, move forward, and how do we compare within the industry as well? So I think the first thing that I wanted to do potentially differently in these last few startups I've been at, especially in a leadership capacity, was understand kind of the ins and outs of the business. And I'm not going to be seen as like that number one data person, but I am going to be able to tell you at like a high level, like, here's why we're making these decisions and this kind of trade-off over here versus this over here. That gives me more credibility. And then also, again, thinking about calling back to like that leader and like us tackling the problem together, that really helps us to tackle the problem together. If I'm like, I'm with you in this seat, like we're gonna do this together. Like now I understand kind of the challenges that you're facing and like the obstacles you're having to overcome. So it makes sense that would be the case.
I mean, one of the questions I love to ask people in interviews is like, tell me how your company makes money. And like, it's shocking how many people, especially in a sales role, like you cannot articulate that. And you've been in a sales role, then like we're probably, it's probably not the right, person to move forward with. But you also get a lot of signal of like how people take it, right? Like you could get people who are very like tactical, like we sell this and they pay, right? Versus, well, what is the actual job we're doing for that company and why, for our customers, and like why people are willing to invest their money time with us. But I think the reason I love it is it speaks to exactly what you're articulating, which is like knowing the business. How well has this person who has worked there for, generally a couple of years, like how well have they figured out what the business is doing? And, maybe that's why they're unhappy at wherever they're at, or maybe that's why, they're looking for something new. But I love to ask people that type of question. What do you think that exactly what you're talking about?
I feel like you could all gauge their like storytelling ability as well, because want to weave in is like the pain point that the company is trying to solve. So it's again, like what kind of pain is your customer having, and how does how does your product actually like making, their job, their company, like what's it doing for it, right? Because it's such an integral part. And I also think you have to continue to talk to employees about that as well, because sometimes, especially when, it's the summer months, so people raining here right now, and it doesn't feel like summer at the moment, but sometimes in the summer months, or even just like in a slump, employees need something to rally around. They need to have that like that vision and that mission again. They need to have kind of thing of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And yeah, I'm probably doing it for a paycheck or like to feel fulfilled with my career. But also I do kind of want to know like what are we building as a company too? Like how can we have that kind of team mentality? So kind of all feeds in together.
Okay. So before we go, you graduated the degree in opera. We talked about this before. You still like to perform. You do community theater, and you're on the board of a performing arts center in your town, or being built in your town. Like what do you get out of performing that you don't get from your day job?
the artistic pleasure of singing. And there's like a gratification of like being on stage and kind of getting to be goofy or like dramatic or something where like, I will say HR people will never say this to a non-HR person, potentially. But so I'll preface with that, right? But like,
We're revealing some secrets. I love it. Yeah.
but like sometimes like you just want to be dramatic because you have dealt with some manager that is just crazy. And you're like, yes, for sure. Like you just want to be able to scream or like throw your arms up in the air or like just jump off or something. And people will confess this eventually to you, but like that like you have so many emotions and things that like you have like poker face, right? Like you don't get that. And on the stage, I get to have I get to play whatever character I want. And it can be so fulfilling to do that. I feel like I can tie a lot of it into my day-to-day job as well, but not to that extent, I will say.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. The closing question I like to ask my guests, if you could meet yourself one day after graduation, you have that upper degree in hand, like what advice would you give yourself?
It's a tough because like I went for a master's as well in and at the Boston Conservatory. And like, but if I would have gotten to meet myself before I went for the master's, I do wonder if I would have said, move to Boston or like move to SF and like go join a startup immediately. Like just go do it now. Like I know you love music. I know you want to do it, but like you're gonna find a passion in people that will pay the bills. Like, right? But it'll be so much more than that too. So I wish I could have accelerated my career by a few years. But again, like I learned so much in grad school too. So it's hard to say what would happen on that. Everything feeds in.
I mean, you're doing pretty well. You just got a big promotion. Congratulations again on that. Good stuff to celebrate. What are you going to do to celebrate? Anything fun?
I'm a big foodie, so I love to eat. So I'm gonna have my family go out to dinner with me. We'll have some cocktails. We'll have some really good food. I think that's what I'm gonna do to celebrate. It feels real now, because it's been publicly posted. So I'm like, yes, great.
Well, that sounds amazing. I do love gifting yourself with a good experience that helps sort of cement it. Feels like the right thing to do. So, well, thank you so much for joining. This has been such a fun discussion. I feel like time flies when you're having fun is a correct and vintage adage that is so true. But learned a ton from you. I love the storytelling around, just having to know the business. I couldn't agree with you more on that. And I think it's such a key piece of advice for anyone, no matter their function, especially if they have any desire to continue to grow in their career and expand their scope and responsibilities. Like you got to know the business, and that's sage advice.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me on. I'm so glad we got to talk through this.
Same. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way to find you?
Find me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Paxton. There's only a few of us out there, I believe. So, but look for the one that's at Roofr. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thanks, Jen, again for joining. This has been another exciting episode of Recruiters on the Rise. If you laughed or learned something new today, please tell a friend. Thanks, everyone.
And that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at recruitersontherise.com. Recruiters on the Rise is sponsored by Lavalier, an interview intelligence platform. Lavalier goes beyond basic note takers to improve your ability to assess candidates with AI-powered interview questions, summaries, and transcription. With Lavalier, you can finally hire with speed and confidence.